As many Portlanders know, this city is known for protesting, and today really was no different. However, while I was out, I met several people who had never participated in a May Day event before, but said that they were obligated, they felt compelled to come out and to say something.
Labor history is also a history of resistance.
From Vancouver to Portland. Large crowds of demonstrators got loud and gathered together this May 1st.
I feel energized, to see this kind of participation and see how it's affecting everybody and everybody stepping up.
I feel safest here because I know these people have values that I respect.
Their signs and speeches sending clear messages, supporting workers, supporting immigrants, and strongly protesting the Trump administration and the slew of changes and actions over the past 100 days.
I have a hard time believing that my fellow Americans didn't see this coming.
Have to take a stand. I mean, we just have to we can't sit it out.
Longtime May Day attendees.
This one's really personal because Donald Trump has cut us veterans off at the elbows.
To first-time participants.
Everything's at stake. There's so much going on.
Expressing that now is the time to organize and act.
The real threat to workers is corporate greed, not immigrants.
We are feeling very tangibly and palpably right now those threats from the federal government.
We will not be intimidated by these tactics, and we will fight back.
Crowds dispersed following these peaceful protests with a vow to come back, saying their work isn't done.
I'm not here to make the rich richer. I'm here to have a good place for all of us. And that's what I believe we should have, and that's why I'm going to keep coming out here.
And as of just a couple of hours ago, Portland police reported that although they were on hand for several of these events and rallies, there were no injuries and no arrests. David, back to you.
Yeah, great to hear that everything stayed peaceful. Thanks, Alma.
KCC Supermarket. Pinakabarato.
Gabe, let me... Start with you. President Trump just weighing in on the case of this Wisconsin judge. What's he saying?
Yeah, that's right, Kristen. Well, he was asked by reporters on Air Force One about this case. He actually pivoted to another case that's unfolding right now in New Mexico. There was a judge in New Mexico arrested this week for allegedly harboring a member of Tren de Aragua. That's what President Trump was referring to. But then, as you said, he made that broader point about the courts holding us back. In other words, his administration is really focusing on this issue that they feel that the court system as a whole is getting in the way of his immigration crackdown. We heard from the Department of Homeland Security also this afternoon, pointing out that this was an undocumented immigrant that did have a criminal record, that had entered this country illegally twice. And so the White House is also talking about this no-nonsense approach and basically saying that judges who get in the way will be prosecuted.
Yeah, I mean, that takes me to my next question. What are the implications for other judges? We know that the president's clashing with a number of courts right now.
Yeah, that's exactly. And look, this shouldn't be a surprise in some ways, even though it's quite dramatic this morning to have a judge arrested in the parking lot of her courthouse. Yeah. But Tom Homan, President Trump's border czar, had been saying for a while that if local officials got in the way of their immigration crackdown, that they would take legal action against those local officials. Just a couple of months ago, in late January, we heard that the Justice Department was starting to investigate a sheriff in upstate New York for doing this very thing, for releasing an undocumented immigrant. Still, though, this is a dramatic escalation to have a sitting judge be arrested in the parking lot of her courthouse. I should point out, Kristen, back in the first Trump administration in Massachusetts, there was a judge who was indicted for something similar to this, but those charges were dropped when she resigned herself to judicial review.
It is just extraordinary, the circumstances of this latest arrest. We should say, Gabe, that at least 2 federal judges have indicated they may hold the Trump administration in contempt. Is the Trump administration trying to send a a message to those judges? And I guess just broadly speaking, what message does it send?
In a way, it's very interesting, Kristen, because this case is different. This was a judge that got in the way of the arrest of an undocumented immigrant who had a removal order. In the instances that you described, those are federal judges that are getting in the way, in the view of the Trump administration, of broader policy. Yes, President Trump has blasted those federal judges for getting in the way. There is one body, though, that he really hasn't, and that's the U.S. Supreme Court. He has kind of stayed away from attacking them, knowing that he could end up relying on their rulings. But certainly, this is intended to send a message to not just the judiciary, but local officials across the country that if they get in the way of the Trump administration's agenda at their own peril. And that is truly remarkable when you think of judges now potentially getting arrested for, either rulings or things that go on in or outside their courtroom. This arrest was supposed to happen in a public hallway. The administration says that this judge had no reason to impede those federal agents.
It's just extraordinary, Gabe. Thank you. Let me turn to you, Ryan. I mean, just let's pick up on where Gabe left off, which is what are the details that you're learning about this extraordinary arrest? I mean, as Gabe points out, it's not every day that we're reporting on a judge being arrested.
Yeah, there's a reason why ICE agents like to do these arrests inside of court, and that's because people have to go through a screening process first, right? So that originally means they don't have a weapon on them. It makes the situation less dangerous. But there's also a reason why judges don't like the idea of these outside federal agents coming into local federal courts, and that's because it's going to discourage people from reporting to court, and especially in the case of victims as well. If victims are worried that they're going to be picked up on their immigration status, that's going to lead to less cooperation with police officers in the first place, less people reporting to court. So the chilling effect is something that a lot of advocates really worry about that in that case. But this is a really fascinating case, and the judges obviously pushed back on this already. She issued this statement, but I would note that arrest in the parking lot, that was something that Kash Patel came out up front and announced before any of the details of this case were available. He then took down that tweet, and that they did not extend this judge, the sitting judge, the courtesy of saying that there's been an indictment, informing the lawyer, working through a process, and instead arresting her. Whereas, Donald Trump was extended that courtesy with his 2 criminal cases before. They did not arrest him in a parking lot. Jack Smith's team took a different approach there. So that was, an escalation, I think, the idea of arresting a sitting judge in the parking lot there.
What do you make of Kash Patel tweeting and then taking the tweet down? What's behind that?
Yeah, we don't quite know. But I mean, just it's very unusual to have these very sort of charged statements from both the FBI director and from the Attorney General about these cases, because they could impact that case down the line. That's something that defense attorneys would love to pick on, and whether or not this was a really political case and make that case to the jury, or could impact the case in many ways down the line. It's very unusual.
Ryan, very quickly, what are you watching for next in this case?
I mean, the next hearing, there's going to be a hearing in this, and what happens to the judge's docket as the rest of these cases are playing out.
Boy, that's a big, outstanding question, guys. Thank you so much, Ryan and Gabe. Really appreciate it. Danny, let me turn to you now and get the legal perspective based on the allegations put in the criminal complaint. Does it sound like Judge Dugan did obstruct the arrest of an undocumented immigrant? What do you make of the facts of the case?
There are 2 separate charges. The lead charge, and the more serious, and I say more, only slightly more serious, is the obstruction of a proceeding, which requires, due to recent amendments, that the person doing the obstructing do so with a corrupt purpose. And this language is hazy enough that it is somewhat defensible. I think the government's stronger case is the lesser crime of harboring a fugitive. And if you look at the statute, it seems pretty close to what the alleged facts are, at least what we're hearing so far. So it may be the case that the obstruction of the proceeding is more defensible than the lesser charge, but both are felonies, and frankly, every charge in federal court is serious.
Danny, just zooming out a little bit, I mean, is there a precedent for arresting a judge under these circumstances? I can't remember reporting on a judge being arrested, quite frankly.
Yeah, we arrest judges all the time and prosecute them, but not for this kind of conduct. Usually it's something involving some kind of corruption or something else, some official misconduct. But in this case, it's very clear that the only basis for the arrest is the allegations that she somehow helped spirit away the defendant who was appearing in her courtroom. So I'm not aware of these kinds of charges happening before. They could have. It's entirely possible. But this is something that is certainly relatively new, applying these two statutes in these circumstances.
You know, Judge Dugan is a county judge. What could that mean about the types of charges that she's facing? Could she be more susceptible, for example, to federal charges?
She is. I mean, she's being charged by the federal. She's being charged federally, and of course, you run into all kinds of problems in terms of your the bars. With the bar, you could be suspended. You could certainly be taken from the bench, depending on how that state handles criminal charges against judges. But undoubtedly, my expectation is that she would not be hearing any future cases, even if she's out on bail. And she will be out on bail. There's already been an initial appearance, but likely as not, she will remain out. This is not what you would consider an offense where the presumption is that the person is held in custody pending their trial. So she should be out fighting this case. But the sad reality is, whether you're a judge or just a regular person, the feds have a near over 90% conviction rate. And really 90% of people who are even federally charged plead guilty. Of those that go to trial, over 90% are convicted.
Wow. Danny, finally, before I let you go, as I was discussing with Gabe, 2 federal judges have indicated they're willing to hold the Trump administration in contempt. Does this arrest potentially send a message to those 2 judges?
Not necessarily, but I will say this about the contempt. Every day in courthouses across America, attorneys and civilians are held in contempt all the time. And the decision-making process happens there in an instant, about as much time as it takes to hit the gavel. Notice in these cases that all of these judges are taking so much longer than you would expect to hold someone in contempt. Every opinion appears to say, well, this time I mean business, and this time I'm finding probable cause, and next time I'm finding someone in contempt. And you know what? I don't blame them. Because if you find someone in the Trump administration in contempt, the next very difficult question is, who in the heck do you hold in contempt? Is it some line prosecutor? Is it an FBI agent? Is it the only person in the executive branch who can't say, my boss told me to do it? And the only person who can't say that is the president.
All right. Danny Cevallos, as always, we appreciate your insights. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News
for plump and smoother looking skin. Olay Retinol 24. Try it for only 149 pesos.
Lives smuggled in, locked away, and forced to work. Federal agents raid an East Bay warehouse to save dozens. Of illegal immigrants. The leader of it all is under arrest.
Neighbors tell us that they can't believe this was happening right across the street. Agents moved in before dawn, surrounding the warehouse near Dunn and Clawwitter in Hayward. KPIX5's Len Ramirez was the only reporter there when the raid went down.
Federal agents raided a construction business on Dunn Road at 5 in the morning, all part of what sources tell KPIX was a rescue operation to free illegal immigrants from a smuggling and forced labor scheme. Police say at least a dozen people were removed from squalid conditions where there was no running water. They were taken away in these vans to what police called a shelter. Neighbors say they would see the workers coming and going at all hours.
It seemed like they were construction, wearing orange jackets and all that. It seems like they were from a construction site, and they had like black Hondas come in, and you would have thought, oh, okay, they just got off work.
Sources say the workers, all males, were held in two back warehouses which were locked from the outside so they couldn't leave at night. Then in the morning they would be loaded up into that van or that white truck and driven to construction sites where they would work all day for little or no pay. The owner of the construction company, Job Torres Hernandez, ran several businesses, including one called Foam Legends. He was arrested and charged with alien smuggling, transportation, and concealing or harboring aliens. Prosecutors say he smuggled the workers in from Mexico to work exclusively for him and used coercion tactics to keep them on the job, threatening to harm them or their families back home if they ever complained. One neighbor who did not want to go on camera can't believe this was happening across the street.
I come working over here every single day, and never I see something.
This is fried chicken. And here's one from Food Panda with what
would-be Premier Michael Dale.
We grow tomatoes here in the Ruskin, Florida area as well. As a Homestead, Florida area. The Mari company is an almost 90-year-old company. I am a third generation along with my brothers and cousins. The company actually started in Boston with my grandfather and his two brothers. What motivates me to stay in the business and what excites me of farming is being outside and watching crops grow and produce product is exciting to me.
That was Florida farmer Tony DeMare, and as you saw, his enthusiasm for watching crops grow was truly palpable, and he's definitely not dying on the inside or feeling any existential dread or anything like that. But the reason why we're talking about him today is because he is a Republican who voted for Donald Trump and is now worried that he might get exactly what he voted for. So on Monday, after Donald Trump was inaugurated, he signed multiple executive orders regarding immigration, one declaring an emergency at the southern border, another designating cartels as terrorist groups, which authorizes him to bomb them in Mexico, mind you, so that's a little bit worrying. He also suspended refugee programs, which resulted in the flight cancellation of more than 1,600 Afghans, which means they now can't come even though they were cleared for settlement and their lives are in limbo and could be in danger as a result. He reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy, and he also took aim at the 14th Amendment, which is birthright citizenship, by ordering federal agencies to not recognize babies who were born here as U.S. citizens if their parents were undocumented. Furthermore, the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump's mass deportations are set to begin next Tuesday, starting with a large-scale raid in Chicago with around 200 officers. Now, before mass deportation officially kicks off next week, farmers like Tony DeMare are pleading with Trump to not go through with it, because after DeSantis cracked down on immigrants in Florida, I'm assuming he voted for DeSantis too, well, DeMare's farm was negatively affected by it. So if Trump follows through with even more deportations, Tony feels like his farm is in genuine danger if he loses even more of his immigrant workforce. Bloomberg reports, Florida tomato grower Tony DeMare is all for President-elect Donald Trump slapping tariffs on the Mexican farmers who undercut him by paying workers a fraction of what he does. He wants to stop illegal border crossings and likes the idea of deporting migrants convicted of serious crimes. But when it comes to Trump's border promises to expel all 11 million undocumented people living in the country, DeMare thinks it would be a disaster for American farmers. Quote, we have to secure our borders south and north, but you have to have a workforce in this country, said DeMare, whose family has 4,000 acres of tomato farms in Florida and California. There's no doubt that this is going to restrict and put pressure on farming and many other industries that rely on this workforce. DeMare, who voted for Trump, has 85 guest workers from Mexico plucking plump tomatoes at his family's fields near Homestead, south of Miami on the edge of the Everglades. A lot of people left Florida for Georgia, north, scared, DeMare said, as he walked one of his fields this week. Farmers had to let their crops rot. Well, ain't that a bitch? You got your face eaten by leopards after voting for the leopards eating people's faces party. Good job. And what really pisses me off about this guy is that he has no concern whatsoever about the well-being of the immigrants that he's exploiting. He's not worried about them at all. He's only worried about himself, which isn't necessarily surprising, but I mean, it speaks to how selfish we are as a country. But he's not alone, because a recent poll conducted by Axios and Ipsos found that most Americans widely support mass deportation. 66% favor deportation of all undocumented immigrants. 38% support using the military to track down immigrants to deport. That's fascist. 34% support deporting immigrants brought here as children, i.e. dreamers. Another 34% support deportations, even if it means that families will be separated and people are sent to countries that aren't their countries of origin, which means just random countries. They're just going to be stranded somewhere randomly. 28% support using defense money to pay for deportation. And finally, 11% favor deportation of legal immigrants. That number is 18% for Republicans, by the way. In other words, Americans are becoming increasingly hateful towards immigrants because they've been led to believe that immigrants, along with trans people,
Agoda's 20th birthday sale is here. We're going big for our birthday, giving you the biggest discount.
A judge told the Trump administration she is standing behind an order she gave last month requiring the government to take steps to retrieve a second man from a prison in El Salvador after deporting him there under the Alien Enemies Act. Judge Stephanie Gallagher of Maryland said she would pause the order for 2 days to give the Justice Department time to appeal it, but after that she would set a deadline for the government to comply with her demand. The case mirrors the government mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the Salvadorian prison known as CICOT. At issue in the new case is the deportation of Daniel Lozano Camargo, a 20-year-old Venezuelan national who was convicted in January of felony cocaine possession and admitted to entering the country illegally. Both Lozano Camargo and Abrego Garcia were removed on a controversial set of flights on March 15th, although Abrego Garcia is a Salvadoran national whom the Trump administration alleged was in the MS-13 gang and deported under a different authority. Gallagher found that Lozano Camargo's deportation violated a settlement agreement. The agreement protected anyone in the class who had final orders of removal from being deported until after their asylum claims were fully vetted by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Gallagher acknowledged the Supreme Court's order last month regarding Abrego Garcia that lower courts must show deference to the executive branch's purview over foreign affairs. The Trump administration has maintained that it has no control over how El Salvador manages its prisoners and that ordering the president to negotiate with another country interferes with his authority over foreign relations. Still, Gallagher said she also, quote, fully agrees with Zinnis's interpretation of the part of the Supreme Court's order that directed the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Zinnis, an appointee of former President Barack Obama, had said the word facilitate implies that the government has an obligation to take proactive steps to retrieve Abrego Garcia. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with Zinnis's view, calling it a, quote, active verb. Gallagher made a similar finding, saying, quote, standing by and taking no action is not facilitation. She went on to say, facilitating Lozano Camargo's return, quote, includes but is not limited to defendants making a good faith request to the government of El Salvador to release Christian to U.S. custody for transport back to the United States to await the adjudication of his asylum application on the merits by USCIS.
daddy ni Kokoy. Biktima sa imposibleng mansa. Agoy. Di kaya sa Brand X? Ang Ariel, kaya! Imposible nga man siya, mas matangtang na sa 10X Power Play.
Tinta? Asa?
Imposible? Posible sa Ariel!
Other news now, the controversial issue of allowing undocumented immigrants the right to get a driver's license in Massachusetts could be up to base. State voters in the fall.
So the state legislature already approved this measure, but opponents have now collected enough signatures to put it on the ballot and let the residents decide this. Kate Walsh is live in studio with more of the legal back and forth in this case. Kate?
Well, here are the two sides. Opponents say they're concerned undocumented people with a state credential could lead to voter fraud, or criminals could lie about their identity to get a license. Supporters say it allows people living here already to drive to work and support the economy, and that there are safeguards in place for this. Now, as it stands right now, starting July 1st of next year, immigrants without legal status can apply for a driver's license in Massachusetts if they show two forms of unexpired identification, including a passport from their home country. The state legislature passed the bill with an overwhelming majority back in February. Governor Charlie Baker then vetoed it. Then the state House voted to override the veto by a vote of 119 to 36, and then the state Senate by a vote of 32 to 8. But yesterday, opponents of the law handed over 100,000 signatures to the State House to have this question be put on the ballot for voters to decide this fall.
What we're finding is that people are really upset about the fact that this law was passed.
We're going to again go back to everybody that supported this passage of this bill to make sure that everybody defends it vigorously.
Secretary of State William Galvin said right now they're working to validate all the signatures right now. If those signatures are validated, the measure would become question 4 on the Massachusetts ballot in November. Live in the studio, I'm Kate Walsh, 12 News.
Where there's anger, there's still hope. And so there are people that are still dedicated. To the cause. And for me, being in spaces like this and helping organize events like this, it can really plant those seeds in fertile ground.
Hundreds of demonstrators packed the streets of downtown Olympia for May Day celebrations on the weekend. They rallied for workers' rights, healthcare access, and immigrant protections. KOMO's Karina Vargas with more on their message of solidarity and unity.
If we don't stand up now, who's going to stand up?
It was a day of powerful messages and peaceful protest here in Olympia. Hundreds of people coming out from all industries, from public health to education, showing their support and standing in solidarity with union workers.
We're all here in support of labor, in support of employment rights and opportunities, and when we work together collaboratively, we can have a bigger effect.
Well, we want to get behind these union folks here too. We depend on them here, and they bring a lot of good jobs and good quality work.
The May Day march started at the Tivoli Fountain on the Capitol campus and ended at Sylvester Park. Chants and music echoed the streets, with many saying they came out to call for single-payer health care, immigrant rights, and stronger public services.
We are also wanting to be inclusive of everyone else, so immigration reform, things like that, ensuring that there is health care for all, that everyone basically has access to their basic needs that they deserve.
Some also say they came out to protest and fight back against President Donald Trump's policies targeting immigrants, federal workers, and diversity programs.
We actually had over 200 people laid off with 24 hours notice when the CDC cut our funds. And so people need to see that they can fight back. So we're concerned with the state of education. We're concerned with the loss in our Department of Education, funding for public schools.
Some say they feel marches like these is the only way to get their voices heard.
Remembering that people are weak when we're separated, but we're strong when we're together.
In Olympia, Karina Vargas, KOMO News.
This is how we made our workflow better.